Elizabeth Smith. I'm a second-year MPH student at the University of Arizona, and my concentration is Health Services Administration. My project title is Review on End-of-Life Care Preferences for Veterans Diagnosed with Cancer in Southern Arizona. So for those of you who don't know what an advance directive is, it's basically a document that speaks your interests if you can't speak for yourself in the event of a medical emergency. So if you're in a coma, your heart stops, obviously you can't speak for yourself. So you can fill out this form called an advance directive in advance, so they have your preferences. So I did all of my work at the Tucson VA. So the VA actually has a handbook filled with lots of information. So they have a directive that was enacted in 2013 that had a focus on advanced care planning for veterans. And the VA is really committed to serving their veterans and making sure that their end-of-life care preferences are acknowledged. And so the Southern Arizona VA had a desire to evaluate their process to see how well they're doing at capturing advanced directives and end-of-life care preferences for their cancer patients and all their patients in general, but my project was just focused on their cancer patients. And just a side note, a DNR is a different document than an advanced directive. A DNR is a do not resuscitate order, and those are generally when you're admitted to the hospital and it expires as soon as you leave. But an advanced directive doesn't have a time limit. They're effective until you rescind it or make a new one or the patient dies. So here's a little bit about SAVA HCS, which is the Tucson VA. It opened in 1928. It's a 285-bed hospital. And they have primary care as well as subspecialty care, such as oncology. It's affiliated with almost 70 different academic institutions, including the University of Arizona, College of Medicine, and College of Nursing, and they serve a very diverse population. So a little bit more about advanced directives. The Patient Self-Determination Act of 1990 was written. It was the first healthcare policy to really focus on end-of-life care preferences and to encourage patients to document that. An advanced directive is a legally binding document. So they've run a couple studies on advanced directives in cancer patients as well as veterans with cancer. So the one just on cancer patients, 76% of them did not want heroic measures taken, meaning they didn't want to be intubated in a tube to help you breathe, they didn't want CPR, any of that. And then a study on veterans with advanced cancer, 53% of them were documented to have advanced directives. Okay, let's see. And so all of this is documented in the chart. I'll show you guys a photo of what the VA's medical record looks like and where you can locate it in the chart. And so the VA also requires that everyone is screened for an advanced directive. So whenever patients are admitted to the hospital, they're always required to ask, do you have an advanced directive or not? When they're seen in a primary care clinic, they ask them if they have them or not, unless there's a note saying they've had that conversation within the past year. And even if they don't have an advanced directive, they're required to document with a note titled Advanced Directive Discussion saying that, yes, we did talk to them about it, and no, they didn't want to complete one or they wanted more time. So another fact about the Tucson VA employs over 2,500 health professionals from all different backgrounds, and the Department of Veterans Affairs pays for it. The government appropriated $65 billion for VA medical care. So for my methods, I had the data analytics office at the VA pull 600 random medical records. So we pulled 200 records from each time period. We started in May 2012 to May 2013, and then May 2014 to May 2015, and then May 2016 to May of 2017. And the reason for that was that directive was published in 2013. So we thought, my mentor and I thought that we would look back right before and right after to see the change over time in advanced directive completion rate. And so for my inclusion, only subjects who were diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lifetime were included, whether it was at that VA, a different VA, or a private institution. So overall, 366 patient records were included. The reason so many were excluded was because when the office pulled the records, their clinic is a hematology and oncology clinic. So some of the patients that were pulled were hematology patients and weren't diagnosed with cancer, so we took them out of the analysis. And we compared sex, race, ethnicity, year grouping, and cancer type with completion rates of advanced directives. So here's a picture of, it's called CEESP, which is short for Computerized Patient Record System. So here it displays the patient name, their social security number, age. So postings over here, it's kind of hard to see. There's D, W, A, and D, and the D stands for directive. So I can click on this box, and it opens up, and it'll say, like, yes, the patient has an advanced directive. And it says, look in Vista Imaging, and you can see it scanned in. Or it'll say, no, the patient doesn't have an advanced directive. And sometimes there's a note saying they requested time for discussion with family or friends, or no, the patient declined at this time, or the patient doesn't understand. And then all this other stuff is just their problems. So this is a good place. When I was trying to figure out if they had cancer or they were hematology patients, I could look in the problems list. And I could also look in the notes. Those are all the oncology notes and any other notes available, as well as in the report section, they have a cancer registry section. But if their cancer wasn't diagnosed at that VA, it wasn't going to be in the registry. It would be in the VA it was diagnosed at. So that wasn't always a conclusive place to find it. And notes is also a place if I couldn't find an advanced directive in the posting section. Sometimes in notes I could find other notes titled preventative health care and maintenance, and there would be a section from advanced directive education where there would be a note saying, yes, we discussed it, the patient requested time to fill it out, or yes, they have it and it's in Vista Imaging. So for my results, this is just for my entire sample. Almost 50% of the patients had, or no, over 50%, 51%, sorry, these are reversed. 51% of the patients had an advanced directive, whereas 49% of them did not, which is pretty consistent with the study that I mentioned earlier where they had 53% completion. So then this is my year grouping. So year 5 is the farthest back, so the 2012 to 2013 year, they had a 52% completion rate. And then 2013 to 2014, or no, it was 2014 to 2015, they also had a 52% completion rate. And then year group 1, which was the most recent year, they had a 48% completion rate. So the samples, these two are pretty similar in size. That one has about 10 less patients, but I wouldn't expect to see the rate drop. We expected to see it go up because they released a new directive and policy for VA employees to discuss these with patients and get them back from them. So now we're kind of looking into, okay, so why did it go down? So I'm in the process of setting up with my mentor interviews with the social workers and the hospice care director there, their process and why they think maybe they might have some better insight since they're the ones involved in getting these documents from them. So then this one is a bit hard to read on here, but this is a comparison of completion rate between every cancer type that I came across. So I came across probably between 20 and 30 different cancer types in the chart. So unlike a lot of these other projects, I didn't focus on one cancer. It was any cancer we came across. So the greatest number of patients with, we saw prostate and lung cancer were two of the most common patients in the population, which wasn't that surprising because those are both very common, especially in military men, which is generally the population that the VA serves. I did analyze gender, but only like about 30 women were involved because there's not as many women being cared for at the VA, and a lot of them will seek care outside of the VA. And it's also common to see patients have insurance and be seen at other places outside of the VA, but then they'll come back in if they lose their insurance. So people kind of come in and out. So yeah, prostate cancer patients had the second highest rate of completion, around 57%, whereas we saw pancreatic cancer patients had the highest completion rate at 100%, which was not surprising at all since that's a very quick cancer for people to die from. So some of the lower completion rates we saw were polycythemia vera, and that was only at 22%. And my mentor and I were talking about that, and she said generally that one has a pretty good treatment and generally doesn't kill patients off as quickly as a cancer like pancreatic cancer. And breast cancer was also that was the most common cancer I saw among the female patients, and they only had a 29% advanced directive completion rate. So, I mean, my personal thoughts was those women, most of them went to like Arizona Oncology, which is a private office outside of the VA. And also chronic lymphocytic leukemia had a completion rate of 37%, which is one of the lower rates as well. So these are just frequencies. It's not incidence or prevalence of anything, although we could probably calculate that. So, and then we thought this chart was great because it could help for another project that if someone wanted to focus on one specific cancer or multiple of a cancer that they're interested in, that could certainly be looked into. So for future analysis, just because of the time and my mentor's super busy and I needed her help doing the clinical staging and survivorship, I ran into some of the same issues as everyone else, especially in the VA charts. There's no place where they're required to write like the clinical stage and survivorship and all of that, so I really spent a lot of time. I did collect a lot of that data, but I just didn't include it here. But I really spent a lot of time trying to read from the notes, like, okay, what stage is this? And it wasn't necessarily laid out, like, this is stage T4 or whatever. So it wasn't quite as easy as we thought it would be originally. And then Dr. Bishop and I also thought we could do a completion rate percentage based on service-connected benefits. So what that means is all patients at the VA who served in the military, they'll have a percentage of service connection. So if you're 100% service-connected, all of your medical care is free at the VA. It can go anywhere from 0 to 100%. So 100% meaning everything is paid for, 0 meaning nothing is paid for, but that doesn't mean you can't seek care at the VA. So my learning experience, I figured out how to do a very thorough record review. I spent a lot of time preparing for the study. I mean, I started this obviously in December last year, and then it took us a long time to get the approval through my college and then through the VA, but luckily they kind of went along with what my college said and decided that it was okay. And there's a lot of extremely talented people that work at the VA. I worked with the safety officer who also is an MPH who's been working at the VA for 35 years. I worked with the privacy officer. She's been working there for not quite that long. I worked with the hospital lawyer. She was a nurse first and went back to law school, and now she's been doing a lot of work for the VA. And then I also learned all about the VA culture. So VA, for example, the very first day I got there, they said, you can't do any work of the VAs outside of the VA. Everything has to be done here. Everything's to serve our veterans. We don't want to compromise anyone's privacy. Everything is, you can only access it there. So I had it's called a PIV card, so I inserted it into everything to log in, and I did all this VA specialized training. And the VA wants to be recognized for the work they do, so if you publish any work that you've done at the VA, you have to recognize that, yes, this was done at a VA. And, their mission is to serve their veterans, so that's the most important thing there. And also, they're an educational institution, and it's likely that anyone who wants to be a health practitioner will do some of their training at the VA. So ideas for future students, similar analysis could be done across, I said in the state of Arizona just because that's where I'm located, but could easily be done in another state. A project like this, comparing completion rates at other VAs, or just to basically make a larger sample. And then we're interested in saying, how do we get patients to bring their advance directives back in? Because I ran into a lot of charts that said, patient wants an advance directive, but they want to go home and talk with their family members about it, and then it never comes back. So I actually coded all the patients by advance directive discussion as well as completion. So I have the data on that. We just need to figure out why are these gaps occurring. So I think the interviews will be helpful as well as more work done on this project. So strengths and limitations, I had a lot of resources available, and like I mentioned, the people around me were very willing to help me, especially when I ran into trouble accessing all the files in the beginning. And then there's also the potential that the advance directive was missed, just because in CEESP there's no way to really search for an advance directive. You just have to sit there and look through. So usually it was pretty easy to find, but sometimes, I had to sit there for 30 minutes looking through one chart to find it, or I never found it. So, and then like I said earlier, it took a long time to get the project going, so make sure you start early. So future career goals and plans. I'm applying to medical school right now, and I hope to attend the U of A College of Medicine next fall. And then that's a photo of my awesome mentor, Dr. Bishop, and I outside the College of Medicine in Tucson. And then that's the end.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Questions, comments for Elizabeth? Okay, Dr. Chamberlain.
If a VA patient winds up in an emergency room and gets admitted to a different hospital, they're not going to have their advance directive on them.
No, of course they won't.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, the VA advanced directives, they do hold legal significance outside of the VA, but if they don't have the copy of it with them, then yeah, it's not gonna, they won't know.
So it's just like a DNR.
Kind of, in that sense, yes. I mean, it's definitely valid at any VA, and they're actually they have this big initiative now, which I'm going to write more about in my internship report for my school. But they're doing like life-sustaining treatment plans and goal of care of conversations. So they're saying, you know, an advanced directive isn't necessarily the best, and you know, in patients that have advanced diseases like cancer and chronic kidney failure, so they want to do, you know, really lay out like what do you want done, and so that might help. And they also, there's a whole bunch of other stuff about medical power of attorney and surrogates and the descending order of who gets to make decisions for the patients if they're unconscious. So.
Thank you. Stephen.